mean, so good beer hunting, what is this thing? There's a lot of different parts to it. I think I typically try to summarize them in three pieces. There's the stories that I tell as a writer and a photographer that loves to travel and meet new people and look at breweries and understand what's happening in craft beer culture, understand what's happening in craft beer business, like just what the hell is this thing that's going on and sort of taking over our culture right now. Just trying to come at it from every angle I can get at it from, and going deeper and deeper into what it is as a business. Those stories they're just my pride and joy. I mean, I started out very blog-like, a little photo here with my iPhone, a few notes here on a beer that I was tasting, and then I don't know, it just started satisfying all these different curiosities that I had, that it became bigger and bigger stories, richer detail, started pushing the photography side of what I do as an artist into that. Those two things didn't start together in any way, but eventually I realized the stories I wanted to tell on the beer side required that part of me, and so it was exciting to see those things kind of come together. So there's the stories, and then there's the shop, right? Good Beer Hunting makes money, not from advertising, not from sponsored content, none of that stuff. It makes money because I have a storefront on there where I develop products for the beer lifestyle that I know I appreciate, and I've learned that there's a lot of other people out there that appreciate that side of it too. It's driven by design, not in sort of some high-minded design sort of way, just simple, functional, beautiful, rustic, natural materials, things like that. And then of course, cool stuff, t-shirts, bottle openers, that kind of thing. And so that's been growing, and that's been great for me. That's gave me enough to keep the lights on and keep doing what I do. It pays for some of the travel and whatnot. So the stories, the shop, and then now the studio is sort of like the third leg on that stool that I really needed to have something cooking. And the studio for me is a great chance for me to work with breweries in a way that's outside of their normal sort of box of thinking of tap takeovers and beer dinners and things like that. I can do two cool, really cool events here at the studio that they couldn't do anywhere else. Right. It's kind of a blank slate, right? It's four white walls like a gallery space. We can do stuff that's sort of conceptual. We can do stuff that's really intimate and small with just a very small number of people, and I can bring those experiences to life. And rather than pay me for advertising on my site or sponsor content or anything like that, they kind of have to reconcile with me a little bit in terms of what I think would be really interesting for people to experience for the first time. Okay. And so we all sort of have to work a little bit harder to come up with something of value. And so for me, those are the three pieces of Good Beer Hunting. That's what it is now. And that's sort of what it's all about, I think, is trying to create a sense of value where there wasn't something already existing.
Awesome. You've told me in the past that you have a fine art degree in poetry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a very unlikely thing, for sure.
So how do you, I think a lot of people that may be interested in my blog are people that may have been told no a lot, or they're not sure they could do something for themselves. And my whole goal is to create doers and people that pick themselves and say, I can do that and I can make that happen, and here's some tools how to do it. So from a guy with a fine arts degree in poetry, how do you find yourself building a successful brand and making that jump?
Well, I think you nailed it on the head when you said a lot of people tell people no, right? We hear no so much in our culture, but I think the most powerful no comes from ourselves. I've talked myself out of way more ideas than I've ever tried, right? And that's the biggest problem. And so I guess, I don't know, I'm having a poetry degree. It's not like I'm giving up my law practice. Yeah. So it's not like I had a lot to lose in that sense. Right. But my poetry degree took me in some weird directions. I mean, I went into the design and innovation consulting realm for about 8 years. And I learned a ton there about how to identify problems, how to talk about opportunities, how to tell a story around something that seems like it's worth doing and you need other people's help on it. I don't know, just the writing and the visual skills that requires are pretty immense. And having to sort of work through that over those last 8 years taught me a lot about what it means to have an idea and to go for it. It starts really small, but the most important thing is that it starts at all. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest factor, I think, for me in starting Good Beer Hunting as a brand was that it didn't actually start as a brand. I didn't sit around and think about what does my 5-year plan look like. Right. I saw something I wanted to do personally, started doing it, and over time I had more and more ideas of what this thing could be. And some of those ideas were reflected back to me from people who loved what I was doing, that loved my angle on a story, they thought it was cool. I learned a lot from what resonated with other people. And over time that got into, that all fed into a bigger idea around what Good Beer Hunting could actually do for craft beer overall.
Awesome, man. One thing that intrigues me about people that I respect or I kind of watch either in close proximity or from afar is how everyone has a little bit of a different definition of what success looks like to them personally. And I personally, myself, find that a lot of times the way it feels like the world perceives success to be very different than how I would perceive it to be. So I'm interested to hear your take on how you think the world perceives success, and maybe how that aligns or goes astray from how you perceive success.
I think we live in an exciting time, especially in the U.S. now, where the idea of success is becoming a more diverse idea. And it hasn't been that way for a long, long time. I think for a long time we've defined it on like how much did you get, right? Do you have the number of kids you want? Do you have the car that you wanted? Do you have the job that you wanted? Do you have the money that you wanted? Are you able to do the things you want to do? Success was very much around attainment. I'm seeing a shift in our culture for that, and I'm happy to feel like I'm a part of that in some ways, but I'm just as much affected by it as I contribute to it, I think, in terms of if I wake up every day and I get to do things I'm excited about, and I'm able to feed my family, and I'm not too worried about the future, there should be enough anxiety to keep you hungry, but not starving, right?
Right.
Then I feel pretty successful. I wrestle with that, though, because there's certainly a side of me that's grown up in a world where I should be making as much money as I can, and I should be working as hard as I can all the time. But there's sacrifices that you do, that you make in order to have that definition of success. And those definitions, I have a kid now, a son, similar to you. I have a newborn baby in my life, and being able to spend time with that kid and have the flexibility in my schedule because I'm running my own business to make a decision on he matters more than my job today. That feels successful, because that feels like power, like that feels self-empowered. I get to wake up every day and decide how I'm going to spend my time and decide what's worth it. I would never trade that. I could never go back on that. Attaining that, I think, is probably the most powerful thing I've been able to get as starting my own business. I don't think I could ever give that back.
That's awesome, dude. That was great. I don't want to interrupt because I thought you nailed it, and I don't want to start talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's self-direction. I mean, you've felt this before, I'm sure, yourself. I mean, you have your own business. Making this film was a very self-directed idea. Like, you got to decide that was worth it at some point.
Right.
And that'll get you out of bed every day in a very different mood than having to get on, eat some breakfast, get some coffee, get on a train. It got to the point where I had to muster the will to get off at the train stop to go to work every day. And I had an awesome job. By any account, I had an incredible job.
Right.
People wanted my job, not because it made a lot of money and, it was an exciting job. I mean, I got to work on design and innovation, new products and services for really cool companies all the time.
Right.
In the end, it wasn't mine. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted to be able to decide what I was going to do every day and go home knowing that I got to do that, and that something cool happened because of it.
That's pretty amazing. I definitely feel how fantastic it is to own your own business, and I align myself a lot with Scott from Greenbush and how his leadership philosophy is to empower people, hire the right people, give them the freedom to make decisions as long as they're in line with the philosophy of your company you're setting forth, and just let them be who they want to be and make.
It's an ownership mentality. You want everybody to have an ownership mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants employees anymore unless you're running the post office?
Right.
It's just not. People that are willing to sell their time for a very low amount of value in return are making the biggest sacrifice. And so, if I'm running a brewery, I'm somebody like Scott. I want people who are there because they want to be a part of something and they want to take it in a direction that resonates with who they are. That's an ownership mentality. And there's trade-offs for that too. They may want to do something you don't want to do, but man, it's so much easier to redirect a force that actually has momentum than to try and kick somebody in the ass and get them to do something that actually creates value.
That's good. Yeah. And Scott he's got, I can't remember the cat's name, but he's starting Burnin Brewery, and Scott's very supportive of him. Like, Scott's like, dude, I'm 100% behind you. I want to see you succeed. And he's given him equipment and, sold stuff to him at really cheap rates and offered to help and whatever. I just think that's sweet.
I see it all over. I mean, Side Project Brewing out of Perennial in St. Louis. Like, he's literally still the brewmaster at Perennial, and they let him start up an internal, like a smaller brewery inside of that he gets to spend his extra time on and, run extra capacity on. And they're both growing by leaps and bounds right now. And they just went to look at a new space because they need more space, and they went to look at it together.
Wow.
2 breweries looking at the same space together, and he's never going to stop being, the brewer at Perennial. Side Project is, very much smaller than that. It's literally a side project, but it's, he's putting his heart and soul into both of those things. And I see that more and more. I think the breweries that champion that sort of like spore mentality or that seedling mentality, I see it even in Goose Island in Chicago. Yeah. The brewers there are expected at some point to have enough ambition to go start their own breweries. It's sort of a foregone conclusion.
Okay.
And I think this is a unique industry in that way, where they encourage that, they hire those people, and then they get excited when they go start something new, because you have more brewers in this world that have that kind of ownership mentality. You are always going to have an artisanal undercurrent to it. You're always going to have a personal kind of quality to it. You're going to have people that are ambitious for the sake of trying something new. They're not just out there trying to run the numbers and get a slice of the pie. They're actually going to create more value than was there when they started. And I think everybody can get behind that.
That's awesome. I'm always curious about the initial thrust of starting any entrepreneurial venture and how much that takes. And for me, I know it's probably been the biggest hardship of my marriage is how much time I have to devote to Rhino and growing that. And not just the time I spend on it, but the mental energy that's in that and not on things at home.
Yeah,
and how
that's a real thing.
I hate that. And it bothers me, but I know I have to have confidence and faith that it's going to get better. And the initial effort I'm putting in now will pay dividends in the future, but maybe just talk off the cuff on that.
I can tell you from my own experience, it won't get better just by hoping it will. Like that's going to be work also.
Yep.
If there's anything I've learned about starting my own business is that it's all work. Most of it is going to be work that you enjoy doing. Even the stuff you don't want to do, at least it's going to be for you. But at some point, you can become obsessed with your business. It will occupy every waking hour, every thought. I can recall having conversations with my wife where we're talking about just stuff in life, and I'll be like, oh, hey, and blah, 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 and I'll just start talking about work again, like we weren't in the middle of another conversation. Like, I can't stop that from running. I always hoped it would just get better. And the truth is that it always just got more and more, the business got bigger and bigger, because that's all I was thinking about. And there's this power, I think, that people have, that when you turn over your brain to thinking about something, or you give voice to it with your own words, or you start taking action on something, like it creates a momentum that makes something inevitable, and that can work against you or for you. And so when I was just obsessing on my business, thinking about it all the time, all I was doing was talking about my business. Then all I was going to do was my business. I had to get to the point where we realized we needed to dedicate time to spending at home the way I would dedicate time to doing something for my business, a meeting or a workshop or whatever. And it feels weird and cold to do that, but it gave me this beautiful sort of relief of like, Sunday is just for hanging out at home. And because we dedicated it to that, I took it as seriously as I would any other sort of thing on my schedule. I stopped worrying about it anymore. And I would wake up on Sunday and I would just have this sort of like great feeling of relief of like, it's just about you guys today. Like, what do we want to do? Like, where do we want to go for lunch? Like, I would never even have those thoughts when I was obsessed about my business, because I would always expect my wife to bring me the sort of inspiration or the catalyst for us doing something together.
Yeah.
Like, you let me know when you have something you want to do and I'll do it.
Oh,
what a shitty frame of mind to be in. Like, I'm totally not a person in that regard.
You just hit me in the face with that, because that's me at times.
No, man, she needs to feel like I'm present when I'm there with her, like 100% in those moments, and that's hard. That takes work when you have something you're so obsessed over. Because I don't punch out. You never punch out when it's your business.
Yep.
You bring that home with you, whether you think you do or not.
Yep. That definitely cut to the core right there. That like, well, you come to me if you have a good idea. Otherwise, I'm going to be over here doing.
Oh, what is she, your marriage intern? Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a terrible. Like, it makes sense because it's an efficient way to deal with the problem.
Right.
But it shouldn't. You're starting from the wrong place. Like, it's just, that hurts. And it took me a long time, I think, to learn that. I think I'm still transitioning out of that to some. But Leo coming and being in our lives.
Right.
I think it forced me to prioritize things in a very different way, and I don't know. There's a great sort of positive blast radius around him.
Does it bother you that it took Leo? Like, because personally, for me, when I go, man, now I can't wait to get home to Eleanor, I'm like, that makes me feel like the worst husband ever. I don't know. I don't know.
I think we're all susceptible to. We all need a force to sort of redirect us sometimes, right? And a kid is a gigantic force. I mean, that's a blunt object.
All right.
I mean, that probably just tells you how much momentum you had in a very different direction for a while. But no, I mean, it's not that I feel like I was being a bad partner. I just don't feel like I was. I feel like I thought the current situation was very temporary, and so I didn't take it seriously for a long time.
Okay.
I kept thinking that, like you said, it'll get better. Things will slow down. I'll find my rhythm. A schedule will emerge. Schedules don't emerge. Not when you're reacting to every little thing in the world that seems interesting or opportunistic or valuable.
Yep.
And there's a million things you could do to create value and get something out of it as a business owner.
Yeah.
At some point, you just got to pick your top three, you know, and then home needs to have its own top three. You can't just put home as like one item on your to-do list. There's a million things in there you should be paying attention to too.
That's great, man. So last question I'm going to ask, what would you say and I don't like questions that are like, give me 2 things you'd tell somebody, or give me 2 top tips or whatever. I hate stuff like that because it's never that easy. But
you're gonna ask me anyway?
Yeah, I am. So just tell me what you would tell the younger version of Michael Kiser, maybe 10 years ago. Hey man, here's some things I need you to understand for you to be successful as you define it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one would have to be stop worrying so much. I've always been the type of person that was convinced I was going to fail, no matter what it was. And I had a very challenging childhood in that way, you know, like we were a very poor family. I was always worried about having enough. We were always worried about having enough. And I think that created an instinct in me to never stop seeking more, right? Like any distance I could put between me and the street felt like it was worth my time. But at some point, I think I had to learn to be more confident about my own abilities. I had to learn that if you start something and you generate momentum behind it, there's the chance of failure is actually pretty small. If you're the type of person that is willing to work twice as hard as anybody else, if you're the kind of person that can learn from others really quickly on your feet, the type of person that's adaptable and paying attention. I mean, if you're a guy that's just a stick in the mud and you're like, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to do it, and everybody's going to have to respond to me, then you got a pretty good chance of failure. Because when you start a business, you're starting something within a community of people, whether it's a community in your industry or a community here, you know, in my geographical location. You rely on them paying attention and giving a shit about what you're doing for that to actually work. And so, I don't know, I think I would tell my former self to relax a little bit, because I've learned that I am a person that's willing to work twice as hard than most of the people I know. And that obsession pays off in some ways. I think that don't let that anxiety just build and build and build. Like you're gonna work, it's gonna go okay. I think the other piece would be that don't talk yourself out of things. I think what I've learned from Good Beer Hunting sort of accidentally was that if you just start something, chances are, like, you'll learn pretty quickly whether it's something you want to do, or there's an opportunity there, or if it's something you should just nix it because there's nothing there, right? Big ideas if you start something, prototype it, just get it out in the world and try it, you know, and not put too much pressure on it succeeding. You're going to learn really quickly that you have some really big ideas that are actually very small, and some very small ideas can get big really fast. And a lot of that is just how other people react to it, what you learn from doing it. I mean, as a trained writer, and I guess the poetry degree taught me something, is that I'm very intimately aware that the first 30% of anything you write never makes it into the final cut. Because writing is not about articulating your thoughts. Writing is thinking. The first 30% of what you write is you thinking on paper, and then you're finally going to get to a sentence where you're like, oh shit, that's the idea. That's what I'm actually thinking about. And same thing is true of a business. The first 30% of what you do is probably going to go in all the wrong directions, and you're going to learn pretty quickly, but you would have never learned it if you just sat around thinking of all the ways it could go wrong.
Cut. Dude, that was great. Thank you.
That's cool.
That was really good.